Instead, I became this dude that you guys know and hopefully love on YouTube. Smash the like button if you love me. I need your validation. But you know what I miss? I miss our one-on-one conversations. We used to do this way more often, but recently my YouTube channel's really been focused on a lot more. My channel's been focused a lot more on kind of doing presentations or lectures towards you guys rather than having a conversation. I'd like to at least sneak in the occasional conversation, so I figured let's talk today about some of the biggest life mistakes I almost made. So these aren't mistakes I made, but they're mistakes that I came extremely close to making that in hindsight, I am so thankful I didn't, but at the time, actually felt like failures, but with hindsight, I realized they weren't failures at all. So let's just dive into some of the biggest life mistakes I almost made. One of the very first biggest life mistakes I almost made was okay, first of all, guys, I hope you understand, this is gonna be some real talk. This is gonna be some real talk. I hope that you guys are okay with this, because this is gonna dive deep into my backstory. So I'm making myself extremely open and vulnerable to you guys. Please don't make me regret that. So honestly, one of the biggest life mistakes I almost made was committing to a relationship simply because I wanted a relationship. So throughout high school and most of university, I had the same girlfriend. So we've been dating on and off for essentially like 7+ years. There comes a point when you're in a very long-term relationship that essentially becomes all you know. And a huge part of your personal identity, your personal ego, becomes not even you, Matt McKeever, it's you as a component of this relationship, and the relationship is actually more of your personal identity than you as an individual. And so I definitely found myself in that place. You know, like we'd started dating when we were like, I think technically it was before I was 16, and you co-evolve and grow with this person, but you also do grow outside of the relationship. And so where you were at when you were 16 versus where you're at when you're 23 can be drastically different. And you get, especially if you go to like post-secondary education, you get exposed to a whole new world. Particularly, I grew up in a small rural community on a farm, never was on public transportation. Like, never had been on an airplane. Country bumpkin. I guess that's what I'm trying to lay out for you guys. I was a country bumpkin. We didn't have high-speed internet until like my, I think like second or third year of university. So like, take that, understand where I'm coming from here with my perspective. But one of the biggest life mistakes I almost made was like essentially getting married at a very young age, committing, starting a family simply because I thought it was the default thing to do. It was what a lot of my family and her family were pressuring us to do because it's what normal people did. And I can remember getting into arguments with, arguments are maybe a little strong. I can remember getting into debates with some of her relatives about the value of house hacking. It's weird, but like I came really close to not being the person you know me as today. I came very close to having 2.5 kids, a SUV, minivan, and a white picket fence. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it honestly wasn't even who I wanted to be at the time I was 23. It's maybe who I thought I wanted to be when I was 16, 17. But as I grew and as I experienced more of the world, it became more and more apparent to me that I wanted to experience more before I committed to something like that. And so, yeah, it was really difficult for me to end that relationship, and very difficult for me to accept that that relationship needed to end. Now with hindsight, you know, at the time it felt like the biggest deal in the world to have that relationship come to a conclusion. But with hindsight, I think it would have been one of the worst life mistakes I could have ever made to stay in a relationship that I didn't find fulfilling, and a relationship that clearly she wasn't finding as fulfilling either, simply because it's all we ever knew, simply because it was the safe route. It was only the safe route because that's what we framed it as. It's actually an extremely unsafe route to stay in a relationship you're not happy with simply because it's all you know. That's way less safe than taking the risk of trying to find happiness. So anyways, that's a very honest life mistake. So if you guys find yourself in a similar situation where, you know, you're fearing change simply for change's sake, even though you may deep down inside be compelled to have that change, but you're scared about what other people think or how it may be going against the grain of what people think of you as you know, their version of what they think of you. I guess I just want you to know that don't sweat it. I give you permission to change. You actually don't need anyone's permission to change, but just between you and me, I give you permission anyways. Another major mistake in life I almost made was when I was like 23, this would have been like shortly after that relationship ended. I was working in a small rural community doing the auditor thing, working as a CPA, and I knew that I wanted to get into real estate. And I really wanted to get into real estate so bad. And I had enough money that I could buy my first place. So I almost bought a place in Mitchell, Ontario. Actually, it was a small community outside of Mitchell, Ontario. So I think it was in Dublin, Ontario. Like community, I don't know, a couple hundred people tops. And I got into like actually a bidding war on this property. The reason I was in a bidding war on this property, the reason I wanted to buy the property wasn't because it was the right property for me. It didn't actually fit like any of my criteria. So it was gonna be very difficult to house hack. You know, it was still actually gonna have a commute to my work. And it was just that like, I had decided that, okay, I'm no longer in a long-term relationship, but I'm still the real estate guy or the aspiring real estate guy. So I need to get some real estate. I need to do something with my life now that I no longer have this relationship. And so I threw myself into trying to get this real estate deal. I came really close to winning that property. And in hindsight, that would have been one of the biggest losses I could have done, because I would have felt pegged to that area. And fast forward, I think like a year later, the economy had changed. We had lost a couple of major clients at the firm I was working for, and so they were essentially forcing me to relocate to a new office. And I would have been stuck with this property in the middle of fucking nowhere that very few people want to live unless they grew up in that area. And it would have been very difficult to make it a cash flowing rental property, but I would have still been geographically tethered to that property, to that area, to that community. And so, you know, I talked about before on my one video where I talked about how buying a house can be a bad idea. Buying a house can be a major mistake. Click that I if you want to watch that video. But I really do believe that. And in this situation, me buying that house in Dublin would have been a terrible idea. It would have sent me back financially. It would probably just send me back socially, because I would have like tried to make it work somehow and commuted a lot and would have hated my life. I hate commuting. Commuting's a waste of time in my opinion. It was one of those things though. At the time, I lost that bidding war and it felt like a failure. I felt like I failed the bidding war, not that I had dodged a bullet. But now with hindsight, wow, am I glad I did not get that deal. And like, in hindsight, the numbers didn't work, the living situation didn't work. All I wanted was a house, and that's the only criteria it really met, was that it was a house I could afford. That's a terrible reason to buy a house. So, that's another huge life mistake. Rushing into a real estate deal simply because I wanted a real estate deal, not because it was an actual deal. Another major mistake I almost made was fast forward, and after not buying the place in Dublin, thank God, after breaking up with the relationship that wasn't working for me, thank God, the economy changed. And so suddenly I was at an inflection point where I was offered like kind of 4 different places that I could transfer or relocate to and still work for the same company. I thankfully, you know, the company handled it well enough. They gave me an opportunity to meet the different partners at each of the locations so I could kind of get a feel for the dynamics of the offices. I'd done some work for 2 of the offices already, so I had a rough understanding of just kind of the corporate culture and the dynamics of those specific offices. It came down to, there was one that I wasn't interested in at all, so that was set aside. So it came down to 3 runners, and that was in, I guess I maybe shouldn't say the actual names of the towns because some of those people still probably work there. But anyways, there was 3 options available to me. One was in a community north of Toronto, and it was probably going to be the fastest track if I wanted to become a partner. If I wanted to go the CPA route, become a partner, and get in on a office that was going to grow fast and had a very growth-oriented perspective, that would have been the best approach. The other one was a lakeside community on Lake Huron in Ontario, and it would be a really safe approach. It was the easy way to become partner at a safe spot. And so it would have been great if I wanted to be a average CPA. It would have been the perfect spot for an average CPA. The first place would have been great if I wanted to be an above average CPA and make partner at a young age. And the third place was probably the least good option if I wanted to become a partner at a CA firm. It was highly dysfunctional office setting, and the corporate structure was just a mess, and everyone was just doing the bare minimum to kind of get by. At the time, I felt like I should go for option 1 or 2 because, you know, why not be a successful CPA? Why not become a partner at a firm? Because that means success, right? I mean, you have to be successful if you're a partner at a CPA firm, right?
Right, guys? Right.
But that's not actually what I wanted to be. I wanted to build this real estate empire. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to experience life. I want financial independence. And yet somehow I'm still considering going on like what would be a 5 to 10 year partner track, which was essentially going to commit me to doing that. Sure, it could have resulted in great financial benefit and great income, but it wasn't going to result in any life satisfaction whatsoever. And yet I still seriously considered that as an alternative. And I can still remember making the decision to go to the dysfunctional office that was actually closer to my social circle, that had the larger real estate market, had the better real estate options and entrepreneur options for myself, where I was going to probably be able to become a more successful real estate investor. Spoiler alert, I'm talking about London, Ontario. I ended up moving here. It was amazing, changed my life. But there was a time when I really thought I should have taken one of those first 2 opportunities instead of going to London, Ontario. Thank God I did though. Like, I would be so unsatisfied had I decided to go the partner route, because I would have essentially committed to a long-term plan where if at any point in time you deviate from that plan, you have this sense of sunk cost that's going to be very difficult to mentally jump that hurdle. Alright, sorry about that. If it looks like the camera angle changed slightly, that's because it did. These long, meandering conversations take a long time, run through batteries real fast on the camera, so that's why the camera angle may change randomly throughout this video. Almost taking those transfers to those communities that weren't fitting in with my long-term plans, but sounded like a good idea if I was trying to play adult bingo. I mean, I don't know if I was lucky. I don't know if I was lucky or smart back then, but either way, I'm really happy the way things turned out. Again, part of that may simply be part of my personality perspective. I usually think things have a tendency of working out in the end. That's not because I think that some magical being's looking out for me, but simply because most things don't really matter. Most things aren't going to drastically impact you, particularly if you're willing to make the best of it. Then fast forward, working in London for a few years at BDO, then it became time where clearly there was no more opportunity to grow. The banks were telling me I needed higher employment income if I wanted to get more mortgages in order to continue to grow my real estate portfolio. So I started looking for a new job. And I interviewed at a ton of places. A ton of places didn't want me, some were interested. But I was trying to be very cognizant and specific about what opportunity I selected. I kind of essentially built out what job is going to result in me reaching financial independence as fast as possible. And so I determined that the best scenario for me was a high-paying job where I also at least got to scratch my entrepreneurial itch a bit, and where I had upside based on performance. So I was really focused on finding a job that had a high bonus structure, as well as ideally like stock options. And in London, Ontario, that pool of potential jobs is very small. There's not a ton of those jobs out there for a CPA in London, Ontario. And I interviewed at dozens and dozens of places. And at one point in time, I came very close to taking a job that didn't meet any of the criteria I'd set out for myself. But I've been like interviewing for almost like 8 months at that point. I was so sick of public accounting. I didn't like the atmosphere of the place I was working, and I just mentally checked out. So it wasn't a good environment for myself mentally at all. And I just wanted to change so bad that I almost took this job. It was a big corporate job where I would have just been another number, a faceless auditor in the back end of the office doing things that no one would ever know or recognize. It really didn't fit any of my criteria other than it was going to create change for me. And I came so close to accepting that job. I ended up turning it down. It was so scary, and at the time I was pretty sure it was a mistake. I was like, oh, this is such a bad idea. What if I get let go at BDO? What if they realized that like I hate my job and I'm mentally checked out? My entire life could fall apart. But what was the point of jumping from one sinking ship to a ship that I already knew essentially had a hole in it because I wasn't going to mentally get fully invested in that opportunity, that job? So I kept searching, and eventually, again, through either dumb luck or hard work, I stumbled upon the perfect opportunity, and that opportunity was at a publicly traded pharmaceutical company with a big bonus structure, stock options, and high compensation. Now, mind you, it meant I had to pour my life into it to the point where like I put aspects of my life on hold in order to make that money, to get those options, to get those bonuses. But it all fit into part of my plan of reaching financial independence as soon as possible. And that's what my big priority was. You know, there was ups and downs at that publicly traded pharmaceutical company, but thank God I took that job versus the big faceless corporate job, because I don't know, I might still just be a big faceless corporate auditor if that was the case. Whereas instead, I became this dude that you guys know and hopefully love on YouTube. Smash the like button if you love me. I need your validation. But in all seriousness, that also came really close to being a major mistake, I think, that at the time felt really scary. But thank goodness I stuck to my guns. I'd laid out what my future plan was and wasn't willing to accept anything but that. Even though at the time that was so scary. Then in addition to that, when I did move to London, I came really close to buying in a part of the city that I knew nothing about, that I really didn't want to live in, but was really affordable. It was really far from where friends and family were. It was really far from the areas of London I know, and it's really far from the areas I invest in today. It was on the south end near the 401, but it was really cheap. And I came so close to buying that place, you guys have no idea. And again, it's one of those things that mentally I'd set a bunch of criteria for what the perfect property was for me, but I've been searching for like 3 months and I hadn't found the perfect property, and it started kind of driving me crazy. I was getting concerned that I'd never find the right house, that maybe what I was chasing was a unicorn. It was unachievable. It didn't exist in reality. Fast forward a couple months after that, found the perfect place, able to house hack, do all that awesome stuff, and eventually had a bunch of my friends move in. And thank God, again, that I waited for that right property, for that right opportunity, because had I moved to the south end, none of the friends or future business partners would have moved in and lived with me. We would have never had that kind of sense of, it wasn't, but it kind of felt like we were living in an incubator together, right? It kind of felt like we were back in college all living together. And had I just bought the cheap place that technically didn't fit any of my criteria other than it was cheap in the south end of the city, I would have never had all those additional opportunities. But yeah, anyways, those are a bunch of the random life mistakes I almost made. And most of these life mistakes, you guys have no idea. At the time, I beat myself up so much over not making them. And then only with hindsight did the full picture really come into focus, where I realized, oh no, thank God I didn't make those mistakes. But I guess the biggest takeaway for you guys maybe is that the way at the time I thought that these were mistakes, or the reason that I felt deep down that maybe that I didn't want to do them even though I felt compelled to do them, was because I did have a big plan. I knew I wanted to be financially independent at this date at the latest. And I knew that real estate was going to be one of the cornerstones towards me reaching financial independence. I knew that in my heart of hearts, I didn't want to be a partner at a public accounting firm. I knew in my heart of hearts that relationship wasn't right for me nor her. And yeah, anyways, thank God I didn't make those mistakes. That being said, that's not to say I haven't made a ton of mistakes. If you're interested in seeing some of the biggest mistakes I've made, hit that I and you can jump over to the biggest mistakes I've made in real estate investing. But yeah, anyways, I don't know. Did you enjoy this video? Was this useful? Was this the weirdest video of mine you've ever watched and you now are going to unsubscribe? I hope not. Jump in the comment section though and let me know, would you like more of this open, honest, dialogue, conversation thing, or should I just get back to pounding out the lectures and creating content for you guys? I'm open to discussion. It's really scary having these open conversations with you guys, but I hope it's rewarding for you. I definitely get some value from it. Otherwise, until next time, I mean, remember guys that making money is a team sport. There's more than enough money out there for us to all make it. But I mean, If you're only chasing money, like what's the point? Thanks. Bye.